Wyoming Territory 1873. The distant wail of a coyote carried across the darkening prairie as Piper Simmons hurriedly drew her curtains closed. At 23, she had already lived a lifetime of sorrow in the 2 years since her husband's death. The setting sun cast long shadows across her small homestead, triggering the familiar tightness in her chest that came with nightfall. "Not tonight," she whispered, striking a match to light the lantern that would burn until morning. "Please, not tonight." Since Thomas had been ambushed by road agents on his way back from Cheyenne, Piper couldn't shake the terror that gripped her after sunset. Each creak of the cabin's timber walls, each whistle of wind through the gaps in the door frame, all of it conspired to convince her that danger lurked in the darkness. A young widow alone was vulnerable in these parts, something the neighboring ranch hands and drifters were all too aware of. Piper believed that solitude was her only protection now. Let them think she was peculiar, the woman who never ventured beyond her property line unless the sun blazed high overhead. Let them whisper about the widow who refused every dinner invitation and church social. They didn't understand that trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Out here, kindness often masked darker intentions. She sat at her small table, auburn hair spilling over her shoulders as she opened her journal. The pages chronicled her lonely existence, the garden she tended, the chicken she raised, the fence she'd learned to repair with her own hands. All the while, she dreamed only of saving enough to leave this place, to escape to her sister's home in St. Louis. There, she wouldn't need to fear the night. The sound of hoofbeat interrupted her writing, sending her heart racing. No one visited after dusk unless they meant trouble. She quickly extinguished the lantern, plunging the cabin into darkness as she reached for Thomas's old shotgun. "Hello," the house. A man's voice called from outside. Young, strong, unfamiliar. "Ma'am, I don't mean to disturb you, but I've got an injured man here. We need help." Piper hesitated, fingers tight around the shotgun. Every instinct told her to remain silent, to wait until they moved on. But the voice called again, this time with an edge of desperation that struck something long dormant within her. With trembling hands, she relit the lantern and cracked open the door, keeping the shotgun visible. "State your business plainly," she commanded, her voice steady. Then she felt. There on her porch stood a young man, perhaps 25, supporting an older gentleman who clutched a bloodied arm. The younger man's face was streaked with dust, his light brown hair blown beneath a battered hat, but his eyes were clear and direct. "The name's Kyle Forrester. Ma'am, this is Mr. Johnson. We were ambushed about 3 miles back. They got his arm pretty bad, and yours was." First light we saw, Piper studied the wounded man whose face had gone gray with pain, then glanced back at Kyle. Nothing about his open expression suggested deception, but Piper had learned that danger often wore a friendly face. "Bring him in," she finally said, stepping back. "But keep in mind, Mr. Forrester, I've got this shotgun, and I know how to use it." Kyle nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am. I appreciate your caution and your help." As she tended to the wounded man's arm, Piper learned that Kyle was escorting Mr. Johnson, a banker from Laram, to meet with cattle buyers. The attack had scattered their horses, leaving them with only Kyle's mouth. "The road agents took everything of value," Kyle explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Would have taken more if I hadn't managed to drive them off." "You fought them?" Piper asked skeptically as she finished bandaging the older man's wound. Kay looked down at his hands. "Did what I had to do, ma'am. There were 3 of them. I wounded one, I think. The others dragged him away." The implication hung in the air between them that this young cowboy had faced down 3 armed men and lived to tell about it. Something about his quiet confidence, the way he didn't boast of his bravery, tugged at Piper's carefully constructed defenses. By morning, Mr. Johnson's fever had broken, and Piper reluctantly agreed that Kyle could leave him resting while he recovered their scattered horses. "I'll be back before sundown," Kyle promised, his green eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her look away. "You have my word." And the day wore on. Piper found herself glancing repeatedly at the window, watching the sun's inevitable descent. The wounded banker slept peacefully, but her anxiety mounted with each passing hour. Kyle returned just as the first stars appeared, leading 2 horses. The relief that flooded through Piper at the sight of him startled her with its intensity. "Might we impose on your hospitality one more night?" he asked, removing his hat as he stepped onto her porch. Mr. Johnson shouldn't travel until morning. That night, as Piper prepared to face another sleepless vigil, Kyle noticed her lighting extra lanterns. "You don't need to waste your oil," he said gently. "I'll keep watch while you sleep." Piper stiffened. "I'm perfectly capable of watching my own home." "I don't doubt that, ma'am," Kyle replied. "But you've been tending Mr. Johnson all day. You need rest." When she remained unconvinced, he added quietly, "I'll keep watch while you dream, Mrs. Simmons. Not a soul will get past me." Something in those simple words, the promise of protection without demand, broke something loose inside her. For the first time in 2 years, Piper Simmons slept through the night. Morning brought unexpected clarity. As she watched Kyle help Mr. Johnson onto his horse, Piper made a sudden decision. The trail to Laram is dangerous for a wounded man traveling alone, she said, gathering her courage. "I need supplies from town anyway." "I'll ride with you." Kyle's surprised smile warmed her more than it should have. The journey to Laramie took 3 days, during which Piper discovered that Kyle Forrester was unlike any man she'd met. A Texas-born cowboy who'd fought for the Union despite his family's Southern sympathies. He spoke of the war with neither pride nor bitterness. He'd come west afterward, working cattle drives and taking odd jobs, saving for a spread of his own. "Land's cheaper here than in Texas," he explained one night as they sat by the campfire. "A man can build something from nothing if he's willing to work and face road agents and winter blizzards and drought," Piper added. Cale chuckled. "Well, nobody said it would be easy, Mrs. Simmons." "Piper," she corrected him, surprising herself. "If we're traveling together, you might as well use my given name." His smile deepened. "Piper, that's a fine name." In town, after delivering Mr. Johnson safely to the doctor, Kyle insisted on escorting Piper through her errands. She noticed the way other women looked at him. Young, handsome, with an easy confidence that drew attention. Yet, he remained attentive to her, helping load her supplies, ensuring she wasn't overcharged. "You don't need to stay with me," she told him as they left the general store. "I'm sure there are saloons and other entertainments you'd prefer." Kyle adjusted his hat. "Actually, I was wondering if you might join me for supper at the hotel. They serve a decent steak, I'm told." Piper's refusal died on her lips when she met his gaze. There was no hidden motive there, just genuine interest. "I suppose I could," she said carefully, "though I'm hardly dressed for dining out." "You look fine to me," Kyle replied, then flushed slightly. "That is, I mean to say, you always look well, very nice." His awkwardness was somehow more charming than practiced flattery would have been. That evening was the first time Piper had laughed, truly laughed, since Thomas died. Kyle told stories of cattle drives gone wrong, of a temperamental horse named Diablo that had bucked him into every water hole between Texas and Colorado, of the time he'd accidentally wandered into the wrong tent at church social and found the pastor's wife changing her dress. "I thought she was going to brain me with her Bible," he finished, grinning at Piper's mirth. "I couldn't look at her during sermons." "Months after, you attended church regularly?" Piper asked, surprised. "My mother would have tracked me down and dragged me back by my ear. Otherwise," Kyle admitted, "some habits stick with you." They lingered over coffee until the dining room emptied. When Kyle walked Piper to her room, there was a moment, brief but electric, when she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he simply removed his hat and bowed slightly. Sleep well, Piper. I'll see you at breakfast. She dreamed of him that night. The journey back to her homestead felt different somehow. Piper found herself pointing out wild flowers she knew, telling Kyle about her garden, her plans to expand her chicken coop. It had been so long since she'd shared her thoughts with anyone. You've done remarkably well on your own, Kyle observed. Most women would have sold you up and moved back east. I considered it, Piper admitted. My sister in St. Louis has invited me to stay with her family. Sometimes I think I should accept, and other times she looked across the rolling prairie, painted golden by the afternoon sun. Other times I remember why Thomas and I came here. The freedom of it, the possibility, even with everything that's happened, I can't quite give up on that dream. When they reached her cabin, Piper expected Kyle to bid her farewell. Instead, he helped unload her supplies and then surveyed her property with a critical eye. Your north fence is sagging, he observed, and that roof could use some patching before winter. Are you criticizing my homemaking skills, mister? Forrester, Piper asked, trying to sound stern despite her smile. Not at all, Kyle replied. Just wondering if you might hire me to help with those repairs. I'm between jobs at the moment. Piper hesitated. Having a man around, even one as seemingly honorable as Kyle, meant inviting complications she'd sworn to avoid. I can't pay much, she said finally. A little money and meals. That's fair. Kyle agreed as if he hadn't just accepted terms well below a cowboy's usual wage. I can start tomorrow. For the next 2 weeks, Kyle worked from sunrise to sunset. He replaced rotting fence posts, patched the roof, repaired her chicken coop, and built a new smokehouse. Each evening, they shared supper, their conversations growing deeper, more personal. Piper learned about the younger brother Kyle had lost at Gettysburg, the Texas ranch his family had lost after the war. In turn, she found herself sharing memories of Thomas, of their journey west, of the child they'd hoped for but never conceived. I used to dream about a house full of children, she confessed one night. Now I wonder if I'm meant to be alone. No one is meant for loneliness, Kyle replied, his voice soft in the lamplight. Especially not someone with as much heart as you, Piper. The repairs were nearly complete when 3 riders approached. One afternoon, Piper was gathering eggs when she spotted them, and fear, her constant companion for so long, rose like bile in her throat. Kyle, she called urgently. He appeared instantly, axe in hand, taking in the situation with a glance. Go inside, Piper. But please. His voice was steady but insistent. Let me handle this. Through the window, she watched as Kyle met the riders halfway to the house. His stance relaxed but alert. When she recognized Hal Jenkins, her nearest neighbor and one of Thomas's former friends, she relaxed slightly and stepped outside. Afternoon, Mrs. Simmons, Jenkins called, touching his hat brim. Heard you had company and thought we should pay a social call. The emphasis he placed on social made her skin crawl. Mr. Forrester is helping with repairs, Piper replied coolly. He's been a godsend, I bet he has. One of Jennings' companions snickered. Kyle stepped forward, his voice deceptively casual. Something amusing you, mister. The man's smile faltered under Kyle's stare. Jenkins cleared his throat. Just wondering how long you plan to stay, Forrester. Folks are talking, are they? Kyle's tone hardened. And what exactly are they saying? Just that it ain't proper a young widow alone with a drifter. Jenkins said Thomas was a friend of mine. I feel responsible for his widow's reputation. Piper felt heat rise to her face. My reputation is my own concern, mister. Jenkins, and I'll thank you not to pretend concern when you've never once offered actual help since Thomas died. Jenkins flushed angrily. Now see here. No, you see here, Kyle interrupted, stepping closer to the mounted men. Mrs. Simmons has managed this place alone because neighbors like you were too busy gossiping to lend a hand. I suggest you ride on and find something better to talk about. For a tense moment, Piper thought Jenkins might challenge Kyle further. Instead, he spat on the ground and wheeled his horse around. Don't say we didn't warn you, he called over his shoulder. That night, as they sat by the fire, an uncomfortable silence stretched between them. They were right about one thing. Kyle finally said, "People will talk." "People always talk," Piper replied, trying to sound unconcerned. "It doesn't matter. It matters if it hurts you." Call stared into the fire. "I should move on soon. The repairs are nearly finished." Thought of him leaving created a hollow feeling in Piper's chest. "Where will you go?" "There's a ranch southeast of here that might be for sale. Nothing fancy. Couple 100 acres, some water rights." "I've been saving to make an offer." "That would be wonderful for you," Piper said, trying to sound supportive despite the ache spreading through her. Kyle looked up, his expression unreadable in firelight. "Piper, he stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "I should turn in. Morning comes early." The next day passed in strange tension. Kyle finished the last of the repairs, working with quiet efficiency while Piper busied herself with household tasks. By sunset, there was nothing left to do, no reason for him to stay. As they sat down to what would be their last supper together, Kate finally broke the silence. "I want to thank you for your hospitality." "You've more than earned your keep," Piper replied, forcing a smile. "My home hasn't been in such good repair since Thomas built it." "I hope whoever you hire next maintains it properly." "Hire next." Kay set down his fork. "When you sell to move to St. Louis, I never said I was selling. You mentioned your sister's invitation." Kyle reminded her, and without someone to help. "This place is too much work for one person." Piper felt a flash of irritation. "I managed before you came along." "You did," Kyle agreed, "but at what cost? Working yourself to exhaustion, afraid to sleep at night." "I'm not afraid," Piper snapped, though they both knew it was a lie. Piper, the way he said her name, soft yet urgent, made her meet his gaze. There's no shame in needing help and wanting companionship. The word hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. "I should check on the horses," Kyle said abruptly, rising from the table. Piper watched him go, her heart pounding with words unsaid. The next morning dawned gray and threatening. Kyle loaded his few possessions onto his horse while Piper stood awkwardly by the door, searching for something to say that wouldn't reveal the turmoil inside her. "Weather's turning," Kyle observed, glancing at the darkening sky. "Storm coming in from the north." "You should stay until it passes," Piper suggested, hope flaring. "Best to get ahead of it." Kyle tightened his saddle cinch, not meeting her eyes. "I appreciate everything, Mrs. Simmons." The formality stung more than she expected. "Safe travels, Mr. Forrester." He mounted up, tipping his hat to her one last time. Piper watched him ride away until he was just a speck on the horizon. Feeling as though something precious was slipping through her fingers, the storm hit that night with unexpected fury. Rain lashed at the windows, wind howled through the chimney, and thunder shook the cabin's very foundation. Piper huddled in her bed, listening to the tempest rage outside and the equally violent storm of emotions within. Sometime past midnight, a tremendous crash jolted her from fitful sleep. The old oak tree beside the house had split, one massive branch crashing through the roof into her kitchen. Rain poured through the gaping hole, quickly flooding the floor. Piper worked frantically in the darkness, trying to salvage what she could and place buckets under the worst leaks, but the damage was extensive, and the storm showed no signs of abating. By dawn, exhausted and soaked to the skin, she sat amidst the wreckage and finally allowed herself to cry. This was the sign she needed. She would write to her sister today, accept her invitation. Sell this cursed place. Thomas was gone. Kyle was gone. There was nothing left for her here, The sound of hoofbeats barely registered through her despair, when the door burst open, revealing Kyle, drenched in mud, splattered but wonderfully, impossibly present. Piper thought she might be dreaming. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, crossing the flooded floor to reach her. "What are you doing here?" she asked, disbelieving. "I couldn't leave," he admitted, kneeling beside her. "Got about 5 miles out and turned around. Was staying in your barn when the storm hit." His eyes swept over the destruction. "Thank God you weren't in the kitchen when that branch came down." Piper stared at him, unable to process his return. "You came back." "Why?" Kay took her cold hands in his. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of you alone in the darkness. Because every time you smile, it feels like sunrise after the longest night." He took a deep breath. "Because I love you, Piper Simmons, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." The words she'd both longed for and dreaded hung between them. "You can't," she whispered. "It's not. I'm not. You are," Kyle insisted. "You're everything. Strong and stubborn and beautiful, scared but brave anyway." He touched her cheek gently. "I know you've been hurt. I know you're afraid to trust again, but I'm asking you to try with me." "What about your ranch?" Piper asked, clinging to practical concerns when emotions threatened to overwhelm her. "That ranch is still there waiting," Kyle said. "But it would just be land without someone to build a life on it with me." "You're proposing inelegantly, it seems." Kyle smiled wrathfully. "I had a whole speech planned. Better timing, too. Despite everything, the ruined kitchen, the storm still raging outside, the fear that had been her constant companion." Piper laughed. The sound surprised them both. "Is that a yes?" Kyle asked hopefully. I think I might love you, too, but this is madness," Piper admitted. "We barely know each other." "I know enough," Kyle countered. "I know you sing to your chickens when you think no one's listening. I know you're strongest when you're most afraid. I know you take your coffee black, but secretly prefer it with cream." He squeezed her hands. "I know I want to spend my life learning everything else." The conviction in his voice melted the last of her resistance. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." Kyle pulled her to her feet and into his arms, his kiss banishing the chill of the rain-soaked cabin. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you, I snore something terrible." Piper laughed again, marveling at how natural it felt now. "I'll manage." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Laramie after the banns had been properly read and the worst of the gossip had died down. Mr. Johnson, fully recovered, stood as Kyle's best man while the minister's wife helped Piper with her dress, a simple blue gown that matched her eyes. Their first night as husband and wife. They stayed at the hotel in Laramie before beginning the journey to their new home. Ranch Kyle had purchased southeast of Piper's homestead. As darkness fell, Piper felt the familiar tension begin to build, the old fear creeping in with the shadows. Kyle noticed immediately. "What is it?" "Nothing." She tried to dismiss it. Old habits. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He crossed to her and took her hands. "Piper Forrester," he said, her new name still strange and wonderful on his lips. "I meant what I promised that first night. I'll keep watch while you dream, every night for the rest of our lives. You can't stay awake forever," she pointed out. "No," he agreed, drawing her close. "But I can be there when you wake. I can hold you when the nightmares come. I can build our home so secure that not even fear can find its way in." As Kyle's arms encircled her, Piper realized the tightness in her chest had eased. For the first time since Thomas's death, she welcomed the night without dread. "I think," she said softly, "that might be enough." By the following spring, their ranch was taking shape. They built a sturdy house with wide windows and a stone fireplace. Kyle had acquired a small herd of cattle and 2 fine horses. Piper had planted an ambitious garden and was already planning an orchard. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant orange and gold, Kyle wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Regrets?" he asked, only half joking. Piper leaned into him, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her stomach where their first child grew. Only that I wasted so much time being afraid. Not wasted, Kyle corrected. You were healing, building strength. He placed his hand over hers, and now we're building something new together. As darkness fell across the prairie, Piper felt only peace. The night that had once held such terror now wrapped around them like a familiar blanket, offering rest and renewal. And beside her, keeping his promise, was the man who had taught her that love could indeed survive on the harsh frontier, that it could transform fear into courage, loneliness into belonging, and a solitary existence into a life rich with possibility. Come inside, Kay said, rising and offering his hand. Dream time. Piper smiled and let him lead her into their home, into their future, into a night no longer feared but embraced for all it might